This will test you out. Hey! The education system of New South Wales has not failed you. Right? You pretty got. There's some who didn't get it. A few people, you know. Right? But really, it's not a cat. It's a long way from being a cat. In fact, it's a circle, or part of a circle, a triangle, and a T intersection. And yet, that symbol system in our Anglo-Saxon world, that symbol system equals cat. Now, in drawing, it's just as abstract a symbol system. We don't copy reality, we translate reality. Now, we have if we have a line, that we believe within our society anyway that all that is within the positive part of that line is a solid, and all that's the other side is a negative. And we do this a couple of times, and we've got something that seems to go through space. There's a spatial concept that this is the lump and that is the void. And there's a drawing down upstairs, a marvellous drawing. You can bypass it, a very quick little drawing by Tintoretto. And I'll share some of the things with you there. Now, it's a very vigorous drawing. Look at it, just a wriggly line, wriggle down here. And yet a wriggly line by itself wouldn't have much volume and space. But the implications here, when the line goes across the form, tucks into the form, goes around the form, there's a feeling that this figure is, the rib cage is pushing forward. You can see the kind of the tunnelling back to there, and then the pelvis is tucking down the other way, so this kind of bulging forward like a kind of car tyre. The leg is coming forward, this other leg is going back. So what the artist has done, if you take this, these parallel lines here, take a set of parallel lines, like that. If I do this, and I do this, those parallel lines now are moving totally different parts of the space. I'm implying that the paper has depth, and you're suspending your disbelief. You're willing to believe that this object is coming forward towards me, this end, especially I'll put a bit of tone at that end, and put a bit of tone under here. They now really have that sense of moving backwards and forwards in space. And this idea of tone is another part of the language. So we've got overlapping lines, we've got lines that go around the form, and tone. There's a marvellous drawing in the Drawing from Reality upstairs by Australian artist Noel Kernahan. And just by using pretty well just black and white, the sense is a man holding a sack. The top surface of the sack, very strongly light, bends in space. You can see a little wrinkle there, just a slight little wrinkle because he bends that back for the head coming back as a top surface, but nowhere near as strong as the top surface of the elbows. They stick straight out in space. The artist has used tone in a very convincing way. It convinces you of the lump, the mass, the solidity of this figure. The elbows stick out forward, both by that Tintoretto device of going these concentric circles, going this way, which projects the volume forward, the cylinder forward, and then this very strong contrast of tone right at the tip of the elbows brings it forward. And to make that come forward even more, he does a subtle one of those both on the head and the nose. See how the nose is also a little jutting forward plane, but it's nowhere near jutting forward as the elbows. And then the top of the pelvis coming forward, the curving down of the top of the rib cage coming forward, and curving down the pelvis here, coming down that way. All through tone. Suspension of your disbelief, a language of form. And there's very few things within our language down there, up there in the exhibition. But so that's one, another one of these. Next, another sheet of paper. And using that language, we can control this piece of paper. So I can imply a cylinder. Right? There's a cylinder implied. There's a top surface and a descending surface. I can poke a bit of a hole into that cylinder, poke a bit of a dent into that cylinder. A couple of dents. Another dent. I can start carving this down through there. Dint that in a bit further. Dint that in. Dint that in. Come under here a bit more. Push a hole in here, tucking in, because the stronger the tonal contrast, the stronger the change of plane. So there's a sense of change of plane there. And if I have a strong change of plane, I have a strong change of form. And I start to convince you of a strong change of form. Tuck a bit of under there, tuck a bit under there, chuck this down here, cut that down there, push that down there. Bring a lump out through there. And it's this feeling that I can control the implications of form. I can make, or hope to make, you believe, and this person, or this lump symbolising a person, probably a little bit more realistic than CAT, but there it is. That the sense of using tone. Now, I could have also used a thing called hatching, which is you'll see up there in the exhibition. Hatching is only a way. We might have a head. Can we have a model? The model's a very important part. And if I can assure you that if Hank feels rather naked, that drawing in public makes the artist feel even more naked, because artists generally do this stuff in studios. Only musicians do air their mistakes in public. But I just have a head. But one of the most important things, the kind of pose that an artist selects shows you the kind of thing that he's interested in. That's a very important thing. So when you go down the exhibition, don't just say, oh, the man, female, male. Say, now why does he pose the figure in that particular way? Now, also, I'd arrange the lighting far more. But because we've got this video screen, we've got to have a different kind of lighting than what I would use in the studio. But anyway, let's have a look at this. The idea of head, or cross-hatching. Just a kind of the notion of cross-hatching. But if I do this, it's like putting tone down. I can build up a darkness building up, side of the nose, tucking in the other side there. And one of the marvellous things about using hatching is that you don't have to make a decision too soon. And one of the problems of draftsmen, always young draftsmen, is you try to do too much too soon. You try to come up to a finished drawing almost immediately, like I'm trying to paddock now. But if you build up with something like hatching, it's something you can slowly evolve rather than come to quick conclusions. And there'll be some drawings down there, certainly by Dürer and Michelangelo, that use a very thousands of little lines that build up to convince the audience that the artist has had an experience of that model, and we have the sense of form coming through. Because trying to make you believe in the lump of that on a flat piece of paper with black graphite, you are being conned, incredibly conned, because this thing does not exist except in a very abstract way. So that idea of working up with hatching, probably should, and you can, that's a very thick, it's about a 7mm lead there. Now, if I want to, if I need to, I can then get probably a 3mm lead here and work into it much finer. And what I'm doing is clarifying some of the approximations. So one works from approximations towards more and more accuracy, or towards more and more the statement of which I want to say. Now that doesn't necessarily mean accuracy. That necessarily means what does the artist want to say about that particular head. And the pencil or graphite or wash will do that for me. And format down there, and I can get tighter and tighter and tighter and more accurate if I wish to, and hopefully convincing you more and more that I've had a real experience of that particular head, not a generic head, but becoming close to being a portrait. Now, there's a marvellous drawing up in the exhibition. Have a little bit of relax, Hank. I want to show you this drawing, far greater than mine, by Eric Wilson. And you can see, sorry about the wrinkles in it, but you can see that this artist has used tone and the process of hatching to sculpt the piece of paper. The paper has tremendous amount of form. We know where we are geographically, every piece of that model. We know how much the nose has a lump coming forward. We know how the upper lip comes over the bottom lip there. We know the depth of which the eye socket is back into the head. The artist has convinced you using a very simple symbol system, the ones I showed you, to make that happen. And that is also useful. That's very bold, very commanding. And there's a drawing by the Frenchman Ong, I-N-G-R-E-S, Ong, lost conjecture of how it is pronounced, but the superb drawing of the head, done exactly the same way, using tone and a little bit of gentle hatching to show you that the volume of that head exists and the reality of that person comes forward, and a much briefer kind of linear drawing down here in the costume. But so that process of sculpting the paper, convincing you of form through the use of tone and line. Now, you can, if you have a shape in your mind, I have a cube. I might feel in my mind that I'm drawing a cube. I might even do that many times, because a lot of young artists draw around the outline, and if they can't get it, they even draw around the outline again. But no matter how much I draw around the outline, that cube will never appear. If I do this, we've got the cube. Yeah. And that sense of we must come in from the outline, we must move away from the outer edge if we want to convince people of form. And of course, we'd much prefer to hug a real human being, a kind of three-dimensional human being, than we would a coat hanger. I mean, a coat hanger doesn't have much sense of form, and it's not very cuddly. But one of the things about the model, he is cuddly to somebody, a person. Now, while the model is posing that pose, I can do a drawing. Now, that's what marvellous. Don't move! But, look, it's very hard to get a model to pose, and especially in a kind of public place like this. That means belong to himself. We can get lots of people to stand, but a good model is one where the feet and the hands and the head all kind of add up together. That's a good model. And that's a nice pose. It looks good. Now, what I want to get from it, see, I could, if I was the greatest artist that ever lived, take a space like this and just cover it with lines, right? And hope that is the most interesting thing in the wide world. But of course it isn't. And so artists can't invent anywhere near the delights that one would get on a human figure. That's why we go to this, what's like a rubbish pile of lines and shapes and tones, and pull from it, extract from it, abstract from that pile the things that delight us, and put those decisions down. Well, I'm going to start a drawing. And the first thing I do is to make some idea, a guesstimate, and drawing is about guesstimates, about where that model is going to fill of this piece of paper. Work slowly, and sometimes the lines that you start with, and you'll find these on the drawings upstairs, some of those first lines are very approximate, very gentle, and you've got to look very close to the drawing to find these lines that the artist puts down at first, because he's nervous as hell, fearful of making mistakes, and therefore the mistakes he's making have to be as gentle as possible, because he's going to work from the general to the specific, from the generic to the feeling of that's a real person. Now, what I've got there is kind of where the rib cage might be, position of the head, the flow of the figure, very hard, that lovely S-bend, thrust out the hip there, the sense of weight taken on that leg there, the sense of bend of that leg. Now, here's a point. If we look at the model, can we go? Yes, right. You'll notice that his knee is very brightly lit, because here we've got a light right down the floor here. Now, this is where, for those people who are drawing, who's doing drawing HSC? Anyone doing HSC, Carson? Terrific. Oh, there's quite a few. Right, good. Well, this is an important part. You've got to learn to lie and cheat and steal. And this is where you lie and cheat and steal. Because where that knee happens, if I want to bend that knee, I've got to change the tone. And so I know when I'm looking at there, the knee is the lightest part of the drawing, but of the vision out there. But I've got to bend that, so a change of tone equals a change of form. So I do that. This leg is just dropping straight down. All right, I'll take that straight down, and I use a tone that's nowhere near as dark as that one, because that's got to be midway between those two tones. I'll tuck in underneath the rib cage, like a Tintoretto drawing, underneath the neck, descending plane, side of head. That arm is going back in space. Now, this is where I'm lucky, because that arm out there is dark, and it's also doing what I want in space. So it's not only dark, but it's doing the right thing in terms of tone, because it's helping my drawing. And the other arm goes behind there. Right. The sense of this, going back to this idea of anatomy, the linea alba going down through there, the sense of the rectus abdominis, that's the muscle that holds our whole tummy in, the end of the thorax there, finding these landmarks is the important thing. That's what Michelangelo was doing to his students, showing where the landmarks are. The pectoral muscle coming across through there, the end of the clavicles coming through there. I'm still mapping it out. Cheekbone, ear coming out through there. Check on. Now, the part of the process of drawing is two personalities that will operate. One is a total commitment. Oh, gasp. Oh, yeah, I love that. Yeah, right. That commitment. Then you've got to bring an art Maud into it, someone who's never seen that drawing before, and they look at it and say, yeah, well, I think his head's a bit big, it's a bit thrust out there, not long enough, right? And so this idea of this dispassionate calculation in correctness, and correctness not necessarily just to photographic correctness, but the correctness of the kind of things that you felt were the important issues about why you want to draw that in the first place. If you haven't got a reason for drawing, a bit like trying to write a letter, if you haven't got a reason for writing a letter, very difficult. And unfortunately, this is very much a teaching drawing. Now, I'm using the background there because I want that shoulder to come forward, because that shoulder is like the top of the cylinder. That lightness there will convince you of the top of this form. And so if I do that, work the background, not just drawing the background for the sake of drawing the background, but so it draws a bit of the foreground for me. The ear is the important thing. It just clicks the light there, top of the head. Oh, if I draw my format up here, I can just take that space in there at the top of the head. That's important because that gets the whole of this fall of the cylinder. A cylinder there for the head. And I can use a putty rubber. Putty rubbers are marvellous, those kneadable rubbers. See, I can just lift that out, and that gets that top of the head going through there, and I'm just feeling that the dome of that head is very important. Cheekbone there. The drawing should develop up little bit by little bit. If you've ever developed a film, a black and white film, underdeveloped. You'll see how the whole thing comes up together. And that's the drawing should never develop any one part more than another part. I want to tuck that tummy back in like the Tintoretto drawing, coming down there, leg coming down. Now, at about this stage, I might allow myself some outlines. Outlines should come very much, unless you're an incredible virtuoso like that Cambiasso, very showing off drawing. Look, mum, no hands kind of thing. But I can start now. Now, this is where I might use my pencil and hatching. Right. Get that top of the deltoid coming through there, coming down the underside of the biceps, tucking all that arm back there, getting the pectoral to come out through there, stronger tonal contrast is needed, underneath the pectoral, the nipples, very important thing, because that determines the stretch. And the position of where that nipple is, gives me the line of the whole of the movement across the chest there. The feeling that there's some side plane of that part of the chest there. The way that this stretches, the kind of lovely stretch line, I make that important line there, the stretch line of that, coming under this part of the rectus abdominis, the top of the, that's the external oblique, coming through there. The top of the trochanter, which is the top of the femur, the long bone of the upper leg, coming down through there. Tuck all this under. So that's where hatching can hatch that back through there. The sense of the sternum coming across there, then the top of the clavicles, moving up through there. The ear, can't resist that ear. It's a bit like the ears on the... So I can now, at this stage, start to develop up the drawing, end of nose, because I vaguely know where everything is. The top of the cranium, side of the head. Now, I'll put that back there because I want all that to come out. So every mark you put has meaning. It's a reason, not just decorating. It's a meaning. It does something. It may not do the right thing at the time, but I want that to move out, and that's why one has an eraser. You can kind of get a sense of the column of that neck there, coming down to the end of the... Now, sometimes you need to walk out, because I find drawing from photographs impossible. I don't know how anyone can draw from photographs. You might just get a coastline, but I need to come over here and check out what's happening this way, because my information needs to be about that. You draw from 90 degrees from where you are. You move around. Now, what I could have got is, if the model might not go back in the spot, is getting to pose from the side on and pose from front on. But if the knowledge I have of what's happening on from side on helps me to work front on. And I've got to, as Picasso said, a good drawing is one where an architect or an engineer could build the object from the drawing. The drawing needs to have so much information. You look to find information, then that information is translated through that very subtle things of line and tone. I love the reason why flipping around the head, love heads, but also it gives me a key to what I can work from and with. Now, the descent of that's the top of his trapezius coming through there. Move that out, the shoulder needs to move down a little bit, kind of thrust across there. That arm, that's a descending plane, so I let that descend right down there. So I'm pushing it back by putting a layer of tone on it. I want the end of the rib cage to stick forward there. I want this to all drag down. So I'll drag that down because that tummy pulls down there. The navel is a very important thing. It shows me how much left and right, the centre I am. The top of the pelvis there is picking up the that particular muscle. Coming down there. Now, tucking under the knee. Side plane, so the catching side plane of that leg. Coming forward. I can't get too much dark tone on it. The end of the top part of the leg is shown by the patella, the kneecap. This comes out. Got to be very gentle about that line because that's a top of form line, whereas I can get much more stress on this line here because that's underneath form. So if I was drawing a sphere, the top of the sphere needs to be light, under sphere. So every time I go under the form, it can be dark, but the top of the form you've got to keep light, otherwise you destroy form. And you've got to make sure it's not like a policeman. If a policeman does this to you and you're driving down the road and does that at the same time, you'll end up with a nervous breakdown. You don't know what to do, and your drawing stops and starts the traffic, and hopefully you know what to do. Because every time I do that, I'm talking about a top surface. Every time I'm doing that, I'm talking about a top surface. And I've got to be consistent about the top surface. I can't introduce a top surface where it's not belonging. So down there, centre line down through there. And I use a bit of tone in the background. Looking for I'm using graphite block. I find that marvellous. It's not as messy as charcoal, and you can get a lovely crisp line with it as well. I think art shops still stock the stuff. I want that arm to go behind the thorax, so I'll tuck a bit of tone underneath there. I'll get the lower part of that. I love that shape. A drawing is not only just a description of a figure, but it is also a pattern. Like going back to this idea here, it's a pattern, and that pattern has got to be the most enjoyable, the most aesthetic pattern imaginable. It's a frightening thing because art is about freedom. You're free to do anything. I'm free to do anything I like on this piece of paper, and of course I'm so constrained by all the art history that's gone beforehand, the fear of making mistakes. I'll bring that nipple across there, bring that across there a little bit. And that fear stops you exercising freedom. And of course, technical inabilities help stop you exercising that freedom. Tucking it through there, coming down there. And this idea of finishing off, now I would certainly take much longer to do a drawing than this. But you've got to go and have a look at the exhibition. And I hope that you'll see some of this going on and watching the technique of someone at work who's struggling with form. Then you're going to see how marvellous those struggles succeeded upstairs in the exhibition. So there's my story. I hope it's of use to you. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, this is a codicil for this. If you really looked and if you really understood, I should be able to keep on drawing on that drawing for as long as I look. If you only can draw when the model's in front of you, then you're not drawing because you're not understanding form and communicating form. All you're doing is copying lines and tones from the thing that's out in front of you. There's a certain degree of cleverness, but it's got nothing to do with intellect. And so drawing is about understanding and converting that understanding into a language, and that language has to be convincing. Any questions? We all run upstairs to the exhibition.